something structural just shifted, and almost no one noticed. The rivalry between the United States and China has entered a quieter, more decisive phase. This is no longer just about tariffs. It's no longer just about advanced chips. It's about who controls the invisible infrastructure of artificial intelligence. A strategic move in the past few weeks slipped under the radar, and it may reshape the global technology balance. While headlines focus on surface-level tensions, both sides are repositioning critical pieces on the board. Today, you will understand what is really happening behind the official narrative and why it directly impacts the future of global power. That changes the geography of chip production. For decades, Vietnam was primarily an assembly hub, a place where components were put together, not where they were designed or fabricated. Now, that dynamic is shifting. Vietnam has begun construction of its first domestic semiconductor fabrication facility, focusing on 32-nanometer chips, the kind widely used in automotive systems, telecommunications infrastructure, industrial controls, and consumer electronics. These are not the most advanced 2-nanometer processors dominating headlines, but they power the foundational layers of the global digital economy, and that matters. Much of the public conversation around the US-China chip war focuses on the most advanced nodes, 3 nanometers, 2 nanometers, AI accelerators, and frontier GPUs. But the semiconductor ecosystem is not built solely on cutting-edge processors. It is built on layers, military systems, and energy grids. They are less glamorous, but they are indispensable. By strengthening Vietnam's manufacturing capability, the United States is not trying to outpace China at the absolute frontier. It is trying to build redundancy into the mid-tier supply chain. Redundancy reduces vulnerability. Diversification reduces leverage. If China cannot monopolize the intermediate manufacturing layer, its ability to exert supply chain pressure decreases. This is structural risk management. Washington is not just protecting innovation, it is protecting resilience. But while the United States diversifies, China consolidates. The clearest example is electric vehicles. Chinese EV manufacturers have slashed prices in global markets. The assumption in Western commentary is that this is purely subsidy-driven, but research shows a more complex picture. China's cost advantage comes from scale, massive production volumes that lower per-unit costs. It comes from vertical integration, controlling battery supply chains, mineral processing, component manufacturing, and final assembly. It comes from ecosystem density, clusters of suppliers operating in close proximity. And it comes from labor and regulatory efficiencies that compress production timelines. China did not simply build competitive products, it built industrial systems. Systems are harder to disrupt than companies. While Washington constructs alternative nodes like Vietnam, Beijing reinforces an already integrated manufacturing web. These are two different strategies. One prioritizes diversification, the other prioritizes scale dominance. There is also a third dimension to this rivalry, one that extends beyond Earth. Both American and Chinese companies have announced exploratory initiatives for orbital data centers. The logic is straightforward. Artificial intelligence requires enormous computing power. Data centers consume vast electricity and generate massive heat. Orbital facilities could leverage continuous solar energy and natural cooling in space, reducing strain on terrestrial energy grids. But the implications are not merely technical. If data processing occurs in orbit, outside traditional territorial jurisdiction, governance becomes complicated. Which legal framework applies? Which country enforces compliance? Who regulates cross-border data flows when the infrastructure sits above national boundaries? For emerging economies dependent on foreign cloud providers, this could weaken digital sovereignty even further. Control over data infrastructure increasingly determines economic leverage, and whoever builds the next layer of infrastructure, terrestrial or orbital, gains structural influence. At the same time, the United States has announced the formation of a tech corps. Modeled loosely after the Peace Corps, the initiative aims to deploy technical experts abroad to promote adoption of American AI systems and digital standards. This is not just technology export, it is ecosystem embedding. Training local engineers, integrating software frameworks, aligning regulatory standards. China has pursued a similar strategy through digital infrastructure investments and competitive pricing in developing markets. The battlefield is not only about performance metrics, it is about who shapes the digital environment in which future economies operate. Standards create dependency. Training creates alignment. Infrastructure creates long-term leverage. This is influence through architecture. Something structural just shifted, and almost no one noticed. The rivalry between the United States and China has entered a quieter, more decisive phase. This is no longer just about tariffs. It's no longer just about advanced chips. It's about who controls the invisible infrastructure of artificial intelligence. A strategic move in the past few weeks slipped under the radar, and it may reshape the global technology balance. While headlines focus on surface-level tensions, both sides are repositioning critical pieces on the board. Today, you will understand what is really happening behind the official narrative and why it directly impacts the future of global power.